Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Garrett Ross. I'm the director of the Apollo Music Festival, and I'm here now to talk to you about tonight's program. First of all, there is some small changes to the program. We will not be performing the Anna Thorvaldsdottir Spectra. So we will begin with the Poulenc Sonata for Flute and Piano, and then play the Weinberg Piano Quintet. Also, violist Lin Su-A Kwan will be playing in the place of Valerie Little. And we have her wonderful bio in the program. So we'll start by talking about Poulenc. Poulenc keeps with our theme of celebrating Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge. The Poulenc Flute Sonata was commissioned by the Library of Congress's Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge Foundation. If you remember last week, the Prokofiev String Quartet we performed was commissioned by the same foundation. This was actually commissioned very shortly after her death in 1953. So Poulenc named dedicated the sonata in memory of Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge. French composer Francis Poulenc was born in 1899 into a wealthy family of pharmaceutical manufacturers. His mother was an amateur pianist and taught him how to play. At 16, he began taking formal lessons with Ricardo Viñeis. Early on in his career, Francis Poulenc attracted the attention of celebrated composer and socialite Erik Satie. Poulenc was really impressed by Satie's eccentricities and, at the time, then shocking manner of Dadaism. And soon after meeting Satie, he joined a self-described musical group that was eventually called Les Six, or the Six. It was a group of 6 composers that we all learned about in music history class. The 6 musicians included, besides Poulenc, Auric, Duret, Honegger, Millot, and Taillefer. Today, some of those composers are performed often, maybe most often Poulenc, but then Honegger is performed pretty often, and Millot. And I don't think that we've performed any Honegger or Millot here yet. When we think of 20th century French music, these 6 composers are very important, very influential, and they were all heavily influenced by composers from France that we might recognize more easily: Cézanne, Fauré, Debussy, Ravel. So they came after. Some overlap, but more or less after. Although quite different in their styles of composition and artistic inclinations, the 6 continued collective participation in various musical events. They also had links with Jean Cocteau. Poulenc embraced the Dada movement's techniques, creating melodies that would have been appropriate for Parisian music halls, something more popular or casual than you might imagine classical music. From 1918 to 1921, he served in the French army, and then began taking lessons in composition after. Poulenc was an excellent pianist, and in 1935 became an accompanist to the French baritone Pierre Bernac, for whom he wrote numerous songs. Compared to his colleagues in Les Six, Poulenc appears a classicist, a conservative. He never experimented with some of the asymmetrical rhythms, machine music, or polyharmonies as like Honegger or Millot did. So for him, futuristic ideas were not so interesting for him. He was more in the neoclassical vein of someone like Ravel or Debussy. Tonight's piece has influence of Debussy for sure, but he quotes Bach almost verbatim. And he liked to do that a lot in his music. He would quote from himself, he would quote from Bach, from Mozart, Saint-Saëns. He was also, another kind of important colleague of his was the ballet impresario Diaghilev, who commissioned music from him for the ballet Russe. Apart from his songs and piano pieces and chamber music, Poulenc was actually an inspired composer of religious music. So this is, the 40s in France, 1940s. Later in his life, after the loss of some close friends, coupled with a pilgrimage to the Black Madonna of Rocamadour, it led him to rediscover the Catholic faith and resulted in religious compositions of a more somber, austere religious tone. Of this are his choral works, the Stabat Mater and the Gloria, which are both incredible pieces. He also wrote well-known music for the organ, including an organ concerto. And among the last of his major works is a series of works for wind instruments and piano. He had a plan to write a solo sonata for piano and solo instrument for every instrument, but didn't get very far. We have one for the flute, which we'll hear tonight, oboe, clarinet, and a piece for horn, a short piece for horn and piano. Longtime attendees of the Apollo Music Festival may remember, I don't know if I can remember the exact year, but maybe 2 years ago, we did a trio for piano, oboe, and bassoon by Poulenc, and a few years before that, a sextet for piano and woodwind quintet. So the flute sonata was written in 1957. It's very typical of Poulenc's music, as kind of quintessential as you can ever imagine for Poulenc. It combines elegant charm with brashness, innocence with sophistication, and it kind of flows very naturally. Like I said, you can imagine it in like a Parisian cafe in 1957. And although it's titled sonata, it's not, none of the movements are in sonata form, so it's kind of a more casual sonata. The first movement is in a simple 3-part form. There's a main theme, which has a pensive character, contrasted with the middle theme that is a little bit more upbeat, reminiscent of early Debussy. The second movement is a song-like movement. Again, I encourage you to imagine some, I don't speak French, but imagine some French love song lyrics when the flute is playing. And then Poulenc ends the sonata with a fast, virtuosic finale. The main theme is very frivolous, it goes by quickly, and it's the last movement where he quotes a pretty famous passage of Bach, also written for the flute. The second half of the program will be the Weinberg Piano Quintet. So Mieczysław Weinberg was born in Warsaw, Poland in 1919, so just 20 years after Poulenc. His parents worked in the Yiddish theater in Poland, and his father was a violinist. He studied piano at the Warsaw Conservatory and was an outstanding student. He was expected to become a touring concert pianist. But Weinberg was forced to flee Warsaw in 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. And not too long after, his whole family was murdered at the Trawnicki concentration camp in Poland. So he finally escaped to the Soviet Union. He was encouraged to come there by his friend, composer Dmitri Shostakovich. Famously, Shostakovich had kind of a troubled relationship with the Soviet Union and with Stalin, and so did Weinberg. Following World War II, a Soviet cultural policy changed and led to an increased persecution of minority groups, including Jewish people. Weinberg is Jewish. And although his music was well regarded and regularly played, He was surveilled, arrested, and jailed in 1953. And Stalin's death later that year eventually led to his release. Weinberg actually became a well-known film score composer, and I learned that one of his most famous works in Russia is the film score to the Russian version of Winnie the Pooh. So I guess everyone knows that. And actually, the thing about Weinberg is he's much more known in Russia and only recently has become kind of known outside Russia. Yeah, and to finish his bio, so the collapse of the Soviet Union actually wasn't great for Weinberg because it meant a loss of support from the state and healthcare, and so he died, his health declined quickly after that, and he died in 1996 in Moscow. Weinberg wrote a massive amount of music, including operas, movie soundtracks, chamber music, orchestral music. He wrote 26 symphonies. His last symphony was titled The Kaddish and was written in memory of the Jews who died in the Warsaw Ghetto. The tragedies of war towards the Jews and his own life, his flight, the murder of his parents and sister, the murder of his father-in-law by the Stalinist regime are definitely reflected in many works that he wrote. He often used elements of Jewish and other folk music, as you'll hear in tonight's piece. During his life, his music was enthusiastically played by the preeminent Soviet musicians of the time, including Emil Galels, who actually premiered the quintet that you'll hear tonight. Rostropovich played his music, Kirill Kondratian, and others. The piano quintet was composed in 1944, so about 10 years before the Poulenc sonata we'll hear. The premiere was played in Moscow. The quintet is in 5 movements. The first movement opens with a very melodic theme, contrasted by a second, more march-like theme. The second movement opens with cello and violin playing together, kind of a folksy, dance-like modal theme. At Heather, and I recognized part of it from Star Wars. So if you're a Star Wars fan, there's like a quote that's almost exactly from Star Wars Episode 2. So let me know if you hear it, if you're a Star Wars fan. In the second movement, you'll hear the rhythm and melody change very swiftly. The theme is stretched, cut up, embellished, and compressed. There's a lot happening. The third movement is a presto, meaning a quick tempo movement, and has kind of like a wild waltz, as well as like a demented tango. Don't really know how else to describe it. The largo, the fourth, the slow movement, is the longest movement. It starts with a theme with all the instruments playing in unison, and then the violin and piano exchange some impassioned solos, and the movement ends very softly. The finale begins with a repeated rhythmic figure in the strings, which is accented by kind of a melody, a rhythmic melody in the piano, if you can call it that. And then the strings and piano start to exchange this rhythm, and everything comes to a boisterous climax, which is followed by kind of a fiddle jig, which you will definitely hear when you hear it, which turns into this kind of very complicated fugue, and again, develops, and there's a series of climaxes. And I don't necessarily want to give the ending away, but it ends in a very surprising way after everything that has come before it. Yeah, the piano quintet is definitely, has lots of twists and turns, and I'm curious to hear what you all think of it. And that's what I have to say about Poulenc and Weinberg. I hope you enjoyed tonight's concert. Thank you.